Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance.
I must confess, since the last video I made about not wanting to invest in Tesla, I've spent so much time learning about the company and its fearless founder and CEO, Elon Musk. And wait for it, I changed my mind about investing in it. What's helpful is that the stock price had dropped to a 52-week low sometime during this year and had been on the low side until recently. In this podcast episode, I'm going to discuss why I changed my mind about investing in this company. The biggest credit I have to give is the biography about Elon Musk, written by Walter Isaacson. This 20-hour plus long book leaves no details behind, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I would say the author has done a great job being impartial, describing Elon's childhood background and his entrepreneurial journey based on many different sources. It's very clear that Elon is a very multifaceted person who can't just be described by a few adjectives. The book clearly spent a great amount of time detailing the history of the founding and evolution of Tesla, the subject of today's episode. Just to prove that I put my money where my mouth is, I had dollar cost averaged into Tesla stocks this year, ranging from $140 in change to about $180. Tesla stock price today, July 30th, 2024, is about $220. In the last couple of weeks, the highest price it reached was over $260. It's not a bad profit margin so far. Anyway, as a long-term investor, I'm going to hold the stock for an indefinite period. So it's all just paper gains so far. What I wanted to talk about in this episode, though, are the key reasons that made me change my mind about investing in Tesla, which are from reading the biography about Elon, listening to Tesla's earnings calls, reading its publications for investors such as the 10K, and listening to other value investors who are bullish about Tesla. You may say, isn't that a biased approach, since these sources are all going to support the decision to invest in Tesla? Well, remember, I came from the place where I was a skeptic, so I already heard all the reasons not to invest in Tesla, and even why one should short its stocks. Although kids, don't ever short any stocks. It's not going to end well. Alright, without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1, dude is crazy and uncompromising. It's a bad trait to be likable, but good for business. Some say that Elon has Asperger's. That's why he doesn't have empathies for people and work them, including himself for that matter, like slaves. However, the biography specifically addressed this. Evidently, his mom had him tested for Asperger's when he was a child, and the test results came back negative. So all he has been doing is really, excuse my language, being an a-hole, in the words of the author and many people who have interacted with him. But of course, it's not that simple. And this is where I think the author did a great job being impartial, as evidenced by the use of a-holy instead of a-hole in some accounts of events. It's a subtle but big difference. A person can do a-holy things, but are not necessarily a-holes. The book described to great lengths how Elon has this demon mode sometimes by being unreasonably tough on people, stirring up drama, imposing unrealistic deadlines, challenging everything, as in literally every step on the production line to see if any steps can be deleted, so the whole process can be more efficient. All that being said, he did manage to get things done, and arguably very impossible things. Matter of fact, the reason why people have finally warmed up to electric vehicles, or EVs, was because of Elon's insistence to make EVs look desirable, not the golf carts that people used to associate EVs with. One vivid example that I remember is the Tesla door handle. To design this handle and make it happen, not only would it increase the engineering challenge, but also the cost to manufacture. That's why traditionally it's just a no-brainer to leave it as is, and that's why all the car handles look the same. Mind you, this is not something that would increase the functionality of the car, So you can understand why the designer/engineer was pushing back hard on this. Not to mention, this would go against Elon's ultimate goal of producing EVs at a low cost. But anyway, you all know what eventually happened. Elon prevailed. And the Tesla door handle has become a signature design, one of several, that makes a Tesla car stand out, thanks to Elon. My point of citing this example is that Elon is indeed the kind of people who wouldn't compromise and would stick to their original vision. We all live in this world where there's just too much pushback, and it's so much easier to compromise. I, for one, is fully guilty of that. I don't like to argue with people, even when I strongly disagree in my heart. I may be more likable than Elon, but I haven't accomplished anything big yet in business. Number 2, Elon really believes in his vision and would do whatever it takes to make it happen. The book goes into this point quite a bit as well. Evidently, before he was even in college, he already showed tremendous interest for green energy, because in his view, that was a no-brainer. Quote, "It's not like there is another option because ultimately we're going to run out of fossil fuel," end quote. That is very true. Of course, many people, like me, don't even bother to think about that because, duh, somebody else is going to go figure out the solution. It's a capitalist country. If the problem is bad enough, somebody else is going to come up with a solution. So that somebody else for EVs turns out to be Elon. In a similar fashion, he's obsessed with the preservation of the human race. What if one day Earth is no longer suitable for human existence? Yep, he's working on that too, the SpaceX thing. I have to say, it's very admirable. Most people go down in history like a dust in the massive desert. But those who dare to ask big questions and find solutions to those questions would make an indelible mark in history. But what does that have to do with investing in Tesla, you ask? Well, good question. The more I learn about businesses, the more I realize that having a profit-driven mindset is not what ultimately makes you money. Most of the time, it's the desire to change the world. Why? Well, because capitalism is cruel. If there's a way to make excess profit, and it's not anything unique, then all the copycats are going to come in and drive down the excess profit to ultimately zero. But as to the ones who want to change the world, well, their business proposition is often quite unique. Think Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, Google, and as a matter of fact, any historically impactful companies, at least when they first came out. These companies, most likely than not, had breakthrough technologies that would change how the world functioned. So the fact that Elon cares very much about the environment, and therefore EVs as a solution, coupled with his ruthlessness and relentlessness, is great. He literally bent over backwards, jumped through all the hoops, overcame the impossible, sacrificed his personal life and health to make it happen. He might not be the most eloquent in making that come across, oftentimes through controversial tweets, but you can't argue with the results. A memorable example from the book was that in order to deliver a certain amount of Tesla cars, he authorized the Tesla employees to build temporary tents in a Texas factory and made additional assembly lines, knowing very well that this was going to be a violation, which they could pay the fine later on. That, my friends, was resourcefulness. Not to name names, but you think the by-the-book corporate executives at an established car company would ever be able to pull that off? Very unlikely. Number 3, just like any companies that disrupted, whose growth trajectory and stock price for that matter never followed a linear path, neither will Tesla's. Now, this is a very critical point made by Christopher Tsai, a third-generation Chinese-American value investor. I learned it from a recent podcast episode he did on the Richer, Wiser, Happier podcast. I really admire his contrarian thinking. Tsai's view was founded on serious, in-depth research though, and therefore convincing. What I admire even more is his humility to admit that he could be totally wrong. Oh well, he bought into Tesla stocks heavily when the price was in the $40 range during 2020. So much for being wrong. Anyway, he really made his case by comparing Ford and Tesla and demonstrating how many similarities there were. When Ford first introduced the combustion engine-based automobiles to the world, they were full of skeptics. And yes, many people were convinced at the time that cars would never replace horses because they were too expensive, too hard to refuel. Remember, there were no gas stations readily available for refueling at the time, and just for people who were into that sort of thing. In other words, there was not going to be a mass adoption. See the similarities? Oh well, you all know what eventually happened. Christopher Tsai did acknowledge that there would be many challenges for Tesla, so the growth would not follow a linear path. But that's when the buying opportunity may present itself for investors. Bottom line is, electric cars will be the future. Again, it's not like there's a choice because we will ultimately run out of fossil fuel. And there is already the push from the government. Additionally, during my recent trip to China, I see clearly that the trend has started big time for mass adoption of electric cars in China. Yes, there will be competition from electric car manufacturers from China or elsewhere, most notably BYD. But BYD has limited brand recognition, distribution network, and customer trust outside of China. In addition, with the political situation between China and the US, it would be really hard for BYD to compete due to the high tariffs the US government is going to impose on its cars. That's probably why BYD currently doesn't have any plans to sell EVs in the US yet. Other than BYD, Tesla is so far ahead from the other car companies that are trying to get into the EV space. The ultimate winner will be a low-cost manufacturer, just like in any other industry. And Tesla is well positioned to be that low-cost manufacturer. Anyway, having a well-known value investor validating the rationale is very reassuring. After all, how much value do you put on a company that grows like crazy? Because it simply disrupts the status quo and creates a whole new category of its own. Last time I checked, when the GAFA companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, did it, they all ended fairly pretty. In summary, the three reasons above are the main drivers that made me change my mind about Tesla. There are still so many other aspects I can talk about that make me like the company and the founder/CEO. One quick example. When Elon was facing the cash crunch at Tesla and SpaceX and was at the brink of bankruptcy, you know who came to the rescue eventually? The PayPal mafia. The people who drove him out of PayPal. All billionaires now, by the way. Yeah, the whole PayPal ousting was a big drama, in a bad way, that happened in Elon's pre-Tesla entrepreneurial journey. But guess what? He swallowed his pride and accepted their olive branch. And the rest is history. For some reason, I thought this is a very good quality of Elon, as most people wouldn't be able to do it, myself included. Our ego triumphs almost anything. Alright, that's all I have to say about Tesla, and hopefully it has been a somewhat coherent story of why I switched my position on Tesla from an investing point of view. Let me know in the comments section below what you agree with or don't agree with. Are you a fan or a skeptic of Tesla? I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.